The night my son told me I wasn't welcome in his home for Christmas, I smiled like a man who's finally found the off switch to a fire alarm and drove away with a plan that would leave no doubt about what respect costs and what it earns back. I could bring the turkey this year, I'd said, sinking into the buttery leather of their living room sofa, a piece I'd bought on a weekend when my checkbook still believed in miracles. The rosemary one everyone used to fight over. Your mother swore it beat anything her own mother made. The air smelled like the type of candle you pick up after you've tried every other way to make a room feel expensive. Vanilla and something floral. My son, Eli, shifted beside me, his gold band catching the glow of the 12-foot pine they'd erected in the corner like a trophy. I watched his shoulders draw up as if he were bracing for a punch I hadn't thrown. Dad, you won't be welcome here for Christmas. For a heartbeat, I stared at him the way you stare at a street you've driven 1,000 times and suddenly don't recognize. Come again. His eyes slid to the coffee table, Italian marble, bought the day his wife, Sabrina, declared their old one student housing chic. I'd helped him select this one. I'd paid more than half. Sabrina's parents are coming, he said. They'd prefer if you weren't here. They'd prefer. I let the phrase sit between us. In the fireplace, a gas flame pretended to be a real one, licking ceramic logs that would never burn out. My gaze wandered the room the way grief wanders the heart, slowly, stubbornly. The custom curtains I'd covered when the first mortgage check didn't go through. The refinished oak floor that had eaten my winter savings. The crown molding Sabrina insisted on because the house deserves it. Every corner carried my fingerprints, the invisible prints of a father who'd mistaken generosity for love that would be returned. It's easier this way, Eli murmured, shrinking as he spoke. You know how they are about traditions. What traditions exactly? The kind that let a man buy your dining chairs, but not sit in one. His flinch was small, but it was there. Beyond the archway, the kitchen gleamed, a showroom of brushed steel and stark quartz. On the counter, a professional stand mixer sat squat and smug, the one she'd needed for a baking phase that lasted precisely 3 weeks and 2 posts. $2,000 to prove she could whip egg whites. My $2,000. And me? I asked, my voice too soft to be dangerous. Where should I spend the holiday? He swallowed. His eyes had that glassy look of a man drowning who still won't reach for the rope. Maybe Aunt Pilar? Or we could do something the weekend after. The weekend after. As if Christmas were a dentist appointment to be rescheduled. I stood. Knees complained, the kind of complaint that settles in a man who's been carrying things, appliances, debts, pride for too long. I started toward the door, past framed photos where my face grew smaller as the years marched left to right, past a closet that held more coats than an entire street needed. My hand found the knob, cool and sure. Tell the Whitakers, I said, eyes on the brass, that I wish them a warm holiday. He said my name, the one he gave me when he was small and still thought I could fix anything. I kept walking. The door clicked shut behind me like a final verdict. Outside, the neighborhood teetered between dusk and that special winter blue that makes strings of lights look like they've been painted in the air. Somewhere, music floated from a house with a real dinner happening inside it. I sat behind the wheel, the engine quiet. My phone buzzed. Eli, no doubt, ready with a compromise about New Year's brunch, a rain check for affection. I let it vibrate itself into silence. Then I turned the key and drove through streets that had watched me build a business out of a truck and a toolbox, through intersections where I'd pulled over too many times to answer calls that always began with, "Could you do me a favor?" At the red on Meridian and 5th, a father loaded wrapped gifts into the back of an SUV while a pair of kids pressed their noses to the glass, fogging the cold. I felt that old ache, how it used to be, before I became a walking debit card with a pulse. Numbers started clicking in my head, a slot machine with only lemons. $2,650 a month, 30 times a year if emergencies counted, 5 years running. A down payment ripped from the marrow of a house I'd planned to grow old in with Lucia. A kitchen Reno, a roof, landscaping, couches, art that matched nothing but cost like it matched everything. By spring, when I'd finally added it all, I'd stopped breathing for a minute. More than the nest egg we'd saved in 20 years. More than any sensible man should send to people who critique his shoes. At Oak and 10th, I passed the branch where I'd signed away a sliver of my future so Eli could hand a lender a check with his name on it. "Are you sure?" the loan officer had asked, pity softening the syllables. "It's a lot to risk on someone else's asset." Someone else's. At Lakeview, the credit union where I'd added a second lien on my own house when Eli lost his job. "Just a couple months, Dad," he'd said, Sabrina behind him in a coat so white it made snow look cheap. "We'll make it right." My driveway looked tired, the concrete lawn cracked in a jagged line I kept stepping over and telling myself I'd fix. The porch light flickered like an exhausted eye. Inside, the air felt too quiet. Lucia's laugh used to cling to these walls like heat. Some nights, I'd talk to her picture on the mantel about a sink that wouldn't stop leaking, about a son who wouldn't stop needing. It's funny how grief pulls up a chair you didn't even know you had and makes itself at home. My phone rang. The name on the screen turned my mouth dry, Sabrina. I should have let it go to voicemail. I didn't. "Raphael," she crooned. Sabrina had two voices, the one for waiters and help, and the one she used for my bank account. "There seems to be a little misunderstanding with Eli." "No misunderstanding," I said. "You were clear." "I know this is unpleasant," she went on, paper rustling somewhere behind her. "But my parents are traditional. The holidays are about a certain ambience." "Define ambience." She hesitated just long enough to choose cruelty over honesty. "They prefer quieter gatherings. Curated conversation. I'm not sure your style fits." "Loud music, spicy food. You mean the menudo you ate every Sunday for 3 years when you moved in with us?" I asked, my voice steady. "That was different," she said. "We were appreciative then." Appreciative. I rolled the word around like a pebble. "And, well," she continued cheerfully, "my father has a doctorate from St. Mary's and my mother speaks multiple languages. They summer on the coast. There's a certain level of discourse they expect. No offense, of course." I could picture her perfectly, nails drumming a stone countertop I'd bought, days already sliding to whatever she wanted next. "I've built a company that's supported 50 families," I said. "Poured foundations for half this town. Paid enough tax to pave the road you drive to yoga on. Money isn't the same as pedigree, Raphael." Then, softly, like a stiletto slipped between ribs, Lucia understood how to move through rooms that weren't hers. The kitchen went silent. Something hot rose in my chest and froze there. "What did you just say about my wife?" "Oh, don't be dramatic," she scoffed. "She was a housekeeper who married well. She had the good sense to be modest about it." The floor steadied under me, the way it does for men who decide in a single breath that a chapter has ended. "Sabrina," I said, "listen carefully. This conversation is over. You can't, we're done." I ended the call. The house felt different in the seconds after, as if a window I didn't know was open had been shut. I opened the drawer where I keep what I don't want to think about and pulled out a bulging folder. Statements, transfer confirmations, photocopied checks. 5 years of bleeding in meat columns. I spread them like evidence and looked at my life in ink, the monthly transfers to their mortgage servicer, the 12 months that turned into 60, the notes that said just until next month. I added the columns I'd avoided. The number made my jaw clench. I dialed my bank. "Customer service," a voice said. "How may I assist?" "I need to cancel an automatic transfer." We went through the ritual of numbers and mother's maiden names. Keys clicked. "I see it," she said at last. $2,650 on the 15th of each month to Cedar Vista Lending. "For how long?" "Looks like 5 years." "Cancel it," I said. "Effective now." A pause, crisp typing on the other end. A tone that felt like a key turning. "All set, Mr. Mendez." "Anything else I can do?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the ease of the word. "That's enough." I hung up and stood in my too-quiet kitchen, listening to the heating vents whisper. In the backyard, the maple we planted the summer Eli turned 10 held onto the last of its dull leaves. For the first time in 5 years, I wouldn't organize my month around someone else's death. For the first time since Lucia died, I could look at my porch light and think, I'll fix that next week because I want to. The folder went into the fireplace. I lit a match and watched the flame nibble, then surge, then settle into a steady hunger. Statements curled black. I poured a shot of the good tequila I keep for guests who never show and held it up to Lucia's photo. To new traditions, I said. The liquor burned in a way that made me feel more alive than I had in years. Morning arrived like a promise, clean, cold, bright. Sunlight found the roses on the windowsill, the ones I still tried to keep alive because Lucia would have rolled her eyes at how I overwatered. I was halfway through a second cup of coffee when my phone lit up. Sabrina again. I need you to pick up my parents, she said briskly, like she was calling a car service. 2:00. Gate 6. Their hands aren't what they used to be, so be ready to handle luggage. Did we not speak last night? I asked. She breezed past it. You're free during the day. Eli's at work. Their Uber app is complicated. And please wear that slate shirt you wore to Eli's graduation. They notice presentation. What airline? SkyWest 1232. Then, without a breath, and please don't be late. You've let us down enough this week. She hung up without a thank you. I looked at the clock. 10:50. Time enough and then some. I refilled my mug, folded the paper, did the crossword. 9 letters for self-denial dressed up as kindness. The answer didn't arrive, but something else did. At 2:15, I was adjusting the angle of a picture on the mantle. At 2:47, my phone hummed, Sabrina. I flipped it face down. At 3:30, the phone had thrown a full tantrum, buzzing itself into exhaustion. I brewed tea. I organized the junk drawer. I marveled at how much a man can accomplish when he's not sprinting to obey people who never learned the word please. At 3:45, a new number called. I let it sing itself to death. At 4:15, calls stacked like traffic. I powered the phone off, unplugged the landline, and cooked a grilled cheese sandwich in butter until the bread turned the exact shade of December sunlight on old oak. Tomato soup steamed in an old mug of Lucia's. Outside, the winter day slid into that blue again, the one that makes you think magic might still show up at the last minute. At 5, the pounding began. Not the polite knock of a neighbor, not even the angry knock of a son. This was a siege. I opened the door to find 3 people arranged on my porch like a portrait of entitled fury. Lionel Whitaker, red-cheeked and sure of his authority. Margot Whitaker, her lips pressed so thin they could cut paper. Sabrina, cheeks blotched, eyes bright with rage. What is wrong with you? Lionel barked, shouldering past me into the entryway with the confidence of a man who has never been told no. We waited over 3 hours. This is unacceptable, Margot said, gliding in as if she'd been invited and then offended by the decorations. We are not the sort of people who stand around at airports. You humiliated us, Sabrina snapped. Do you have any idea what that cab cost? And now Dad's back is acting up because he lifted his own suitcase. You made him lift his own suitcase. I closed the door behind them, let the lock turn with a click that felt like punctuation. Get out. Lionel's mouth fell open. I beg your pardon? This is my house, I said, voice quiet enough that they had to lean in to catch it. You don't walk into my home. You don't talk to me like that. And you don't make demands. You think you can treat us this way? Margot said, incredulous. We have friends in every corner of this town. Then ask them for rides next time. Lionel stabbed a finger into the air. You have just purchased a very public problem, Mr. Mendez. You already tried to purchase me, I said, nodding toward Sabrina. Turns out I'm not for sale. They filed out, Sabrina looking over her shoulder at me as if memorizing my face for a vengeance she hadn't yet planned. The rental car sputtered to life and took their sanctimony to someone else's driveway. I stood in the silence they left behind and felt something that might have been fear, but it was thinner than the thing next to it, anticipation. 3 days later, my face looked out from the 3rd page of the Cedar Falls Chronicle, smudged slightly by cheap ink. The headline might as well have been a smear across my name. Local contractor abandons elderly couple during holiday weather alert. I read the story with the kind of calm that makes people nervous. The quotes were artfully arranged, Lionel stunned by my callousness, Margot frightened by a storm that had been nothing but a crisp 49 degrees and clear. Words like irresponsible and unstable did a little dance around my photo. The byline belonged to Dana Kellerman, lifestyle editor, who specialized in profiles of people with money and leftover ornaments. I poured coffee I didn't want and read the piece again. Then I read it a third time and began the mental algebra I've always been good at: who asks for favors, who grants them, who prints them. I didn't recognize Dana, but I recognized the network. Lionel had said public, and he wasn't a man who bluffed. In a town the size of Cedar Falls, reputation is weather. It shapes everything and no one can escape it. He had declared war in the paper. Fine. I have fought wars without leaving my desk. I opened my laptop. The browser bloomed with tabs like cards in a gambler's hand. I started with the obvious. Lionel, retired bank director, golf club board member, quiet donor to the museum, loud donor at charity galas. Margot, chair of the Arts Council, photos in boutiques and boat decks and months, where my transfers had bounced because they'd decided to repave their driveway in imported stone. Sabrina, a feed full of "our home" captions that should have said "his money." On a week I'd covered the water bill, she was posting the kind of dessert you order because you want other people to know you ordered it. But it was Eli's professional page that gave me the last piece. In his recent activity, a new connection beamed back at me: Dana Kellerman, the exact Dana who'd been handed my dignity and asked to turn it into a warning for the middle class. The Chronicle's masthead yielded an editor who, surprise, had been a guest judge at a country club event chaired by Lionel the previous spring. Cedar Falls was a small enough place for these circles to overlap tidily. I printed what I needed. I compiled the rest. Bank statements, copies of cashier's checks, notations in the margins where a note said emergency, and the photo beside it on Sabrina's account showed a weekend on the bay. A ledger anyone could understand, even if they didn't speak numbers. The night before Christmas, I sat at my old pine table and piled the evidence into 12 neat stacks, one for each guest Sabrina had bragged about hosting. The news article went on top of each, my corrections in red. False weather, I wrote beside the storm claims. Omitted context beside the part where I allegedly left helpless people to freeze. A photograph of the airport sky that day, basalt blue, not a flake in sight, went on the back. Receipts sat beneath those pages like heavy bricks. The down payment I'd carved out of the equity in the house Lucia, and I chose with the kind of care some people reserve for children's names. The monthly transfers I'd made like prayers. The appliances. The furniture. The project invoices I'd paid in full for someone else's wall moldings and someone else's porch. I pressed my best suit. The navy one I wore the day the city gave me a plaque for donating labor to a senior center. I ironed a white shirt and a slate tie. I polished the boots Lucia liked. I stood in the mirror and saw a man I recognized again. At 6:45 on Christmas Eve, I parked beneath a cold lamppost on Quinn Avenue and looked at the Whitaker's house. It glowed. Through the picture window, I could see Sabrina's silhouette moving like a hostess on a stage. They'd strung garlands along the banister the way magazines do when they want to sell you the idea of belonging. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Safety, when you live where they live, is an accessory you assume, like a cufflink. The dining room hushed when I walked in. 12 faces blinked at me as if I'd stepped out of a photograph and decided to move. The table was the kind that needed a second mortgage to seat 12. Crystal twinkled. Candles did their choreographed flickering. "Good evening," I said, setting my leather brief at the credenza as if I'd planned to leave it there all along. "I won't take much of your time." Sabrina regained her voice first. "You can't be here." "Oh, I can," I said lightly, and I am. I handed the first stack to a woman with pearl buttons that caught the light like tiny moons. "For you," I said. "Happy holidays." I moved clockwise, placing a packet in front of each guest, answering their bewildered glances with the sort of polite smile you give polite strangers. Lionel half rose, veins raised in his neck like braided rope. "Raphael, you're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said. "I'm saving you the trouble of lying later." When the last packet found the last plate, I stepped back, clasped my hands, and waited. The rustle of paper filled the room. Forks paused. Eyes narrowed. Lips moved while minds did math they'd never thought they'd need to do about someone like me. "What is this?" asked a man with an expensive sweater and a more expensive haircut. 5 years of me paying for the roof above your heads, I said. Mortgage payments, down payment, major renovations, surprise emergencies that weren't emergencies at all. That can't be correct, Margot whispered, scanning the numbers with a speed that suggested she knew exactly how to read them. It is, I said. Sabrina let out a laugh so sharp it stung. He offered to help. We never asked, second folder in each stack, I said. You'll find text messages labeled by year. Requests for help, deadlines, threats from lenders. A man near the end of the table lifted a page, brow furrowing. This shows the exact date your lender issued a delinquency notice. Eli knew, I said. Eli. The woman in pearls turned to him, her voice softening. She liked him. Most people did until things cost them.
Is this true? Eli stared at the paper as if it would answer for him. I thought we were borrowing. I thought you were my son, I said. No venom, just bone. Lionel found the article in his pocket and seized it like a lifeline. He's twisting this, he blustered. He abandoned us at the airport. Turn the page, I said. You'll see the weather data and a photo.
Also a transcript from the cab company, noting the route taken by 2 adults with functioning phones and a credit card. Dana's printed paragraph looked smaller in this room. They put my face in the paper, I told the room at large. Called me unstable. They left out the part where they banned me from Christmas because their dinner table had standards I didn't meet. That's not, Sabrina began. Third page, I said, almost gently. Notes from last week's phone call, reconstructed from memory within minutes. Some phrases are verbatim. Margot scanned, stopped, and went pale. Her friend's mouth opened slowly like a curtain being drawn. Margot, the friend said, hurt lining her tone, tell me you didn't say those things. She's twisting his Lionel started. No, the friend shook her head. It sounds exactly like something you'd say. Quiet isn't always the sound of nothing. Sometimes it's the sound of a circle snapping shut. I let the quiet work. I'm not here to ruin your evening, I said. It seems intent on doing that itself. I came to correct the record. If you're going to discuss me over dessert, I'd like you to have the facts. I picked up the Chronicle from my stack, held it at eye level, and then set it down again. People like me build your walls. We fix your foundations. We show up in boots when you spill wine on carpet you can't clean yourself. We're not props for your stories. I closed the brief with a soft thud. Enjoy your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for. I walked out to the sound of paper shuffling and a dozen brains choosing sides. When the door shut behind me, the winter air felt like something I'd earned. 3 months later, a certified letter arrived that smelled like debt and consequence. Notice of default, it announced before I even tore it open. Inside, a number that would have made me swallow a year earlier sat on the page like a cat who knows the house is now its own. 3 months of missed payments. 14 days to cure. Or else. I stirred my coffee. Read the letter again the way you read a familiar poem and find new meaning in it each time. Set it beside the paper discussing city composting rules. Both, strangely, mattered to me about the same amount now. The calls had begun in January. Sabrina's first was volcanic. Everything was my fault, including interest rates and the price of garlic. The second was shrill. By the third, she cried. I blocked her number after the fourth. Lionel rang my landline, then my business. Margot left a measured voicemail that sounded like something a museum docent would say about a forgotten painting. Eli called most nights for a week. I let those ring out too. Men have to learn what silence means. On a Thursday evening burnished with the first suggestion of spring, Eli knocked. He looked older in the way men do when they realize they're not spared from physics or math. His suit had lost its press. His eyes were rimmed red. He stared at the new sofa I'd bought the week after my first transfer didn't go through. Not expensive, but paid for. Notice that, the kind of pride cash gives when you've watched it walk out of your account for years without saying goodbye. Dad, he said when I opened the door. I need to talk. We sat in the living room I had decided would be mine again. There was a framed photo on the mantel now of me standing between my sister Pilar and her husband at an outdoor table at Easter. We were laughing. My mouth had not remembered that shape in years. Nice place, he said, voice small. It's amazing what you can do when you spend your money on your own life, I said. Coffee? He shook his head and perched on the edge of the cushion as if ready to run. "I'm sorry," he said. "For everything. For Christmas. For the article. For the things Sabrina said about Mom. For not stopping any of it. Go on." "I didn't know Lionel was talking to the paper," he said. "When I found out, I told them it was wrong. They said it was just a tone piece. Your wife called your mother a housekeeper who married well," I said. "She called me noise. She dressed prejudice in fancy words and served it like an amuse-bouche." He winced. "I should have defended you." "Yes." He folded forward, elbows to knees. "We're in default. They're going to take the house. Sabrina says if I loved her, I'd fix it." "And what do you say?" I asked. "I say I don't know how." "You do," I said calmly. "You just don't like the answer." He pressed his hand to his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was threaded with humility I had not heard since he was small. "Is there any chance? Would you consider—" No, he nodded, as if he'd rehearsed that answer and still hoped for a different ending. "We calculated what you sent us," he murmured. "Everything. The down payment. The monthly transfers. The emergencies. It's more than 200,000, Dad. 237,468, I said. "I know because I added it up the night I stopped. That's a number no father should be able to say without choking. But I say it now without even a cough." He stared at his hands. "I don't deserve your help." "No," I said. "You don't." "Do I deserve you?" he whispered. That reached a part of me I had boarded up. I looked at Lucia's photo, at her smile that said, "Don't be cruel where you can be kind," and then at Pilar's. "You don't lose a father like a set of keys," I said. "You give him away little by little, in tolerated insults and inaction, in silence when the room turns ugly. You gave me away, Eli. The difference matters." He nodded, tears sliding down cheeks that had once been sticky with popsicle, cheeks I'd wiped with the hem of my shirt when we played catch until the sky went lavender. "I want to try again," he said. "Then start," I said. "Not with a mortgage. With dinner on a Tuesday. With a holiday you invite me to because you want me there, not because it's convenient optics. With the next time someone sneers at your father, you either stand or you leave with me." "And the house," he asked, voice child small again. "Is not my problem," I said gently. "You sell it or you don't. You downsize, you move, you find a job that pays for what you buy. We all live under the rules of gravity. This is e-learning yours." He stood, spine straighter than when he walked in. "You were different that night," he said. "When you walked into that dining room, I was proud. I was furious and embarrassed and proud. I'm glad one of us was," I said. He smiled, small but real. "Can I come by Sunday? Pilar said she's making caldo." "Come hungry," I said. After he left, I stepped onto the small back porch and watched the maple. Buds hunched like sleeping animals along its branches. Spring was happening whether anyone liked it or not. I thought of the years I'd spent tying my joy to the whims of people who thought pedigree meant character. I thought of the late nights, the early mornings, the times I'd stood in tool belts next to men whose names I never learned, building rooms where laughter would live for decades. I thought of Lucia. I thought of the 12 people who now saw me clearly, not because I explained myself, but because I made them look. My phone buzzed. "Pilar, Sunday at 6. Kids want to show you their science projects." I typed back, wouldn't miss it. In the months that followed, the Chronicle ran a correction. Small, bottom of the page. They did not apologize for editorializing my life. They apologized for mistakenly describing the weather as storm conditions when it had been seasonably clear. I clipped it and taped it to the underside of Lucia's photo. Not because I needed to remember I was right, but because I wanted to remember how some people apologize, tiny, late, and only when they must. The Whitaker's name disappeared from a couple of committees. Margot stepped down from the Arts Council with a statement about new directions. Lionel kept going to the club. That sort of man always does. Sabrina's posts changed tone, less gloss, more, "We're in this together," a style of pleading disguised as strength. Eli took a second job for a while, then a different first one. They sold the house in July, sunflowers nodding in the yard as strangers carried measured steps through rooms that still smelled faintly of someone else's holiday candle. Some Saturdays, Eli came by and helped me replace the porch light, patch the driveway, fix the drawer I kept telling myself I would fix. Sometimes he sat and we watched a game and didn't talk about any of it. Sometimes we did. Trust, it turns out, is quieter than reconciliation. It has fewer speeches. It shows up when you ask if someone wants more coffee and they say yes, please. In August, I took Pilar's grandkids to the county fair. We ate too much. We laughed when the goat ate a napkin out of my pocket. A boy who'd memorized the names of all the rides asked if I'd go on the Ferris wheel with him. At the top, the town spread out like a map. The river, the mills, the rooflines of houses I'd once stood beneath with a level and a hope. It's small, he said, but it's ours. Exactly, I said.
In December, a year to the week after I'd been told I wasn't welcome, I bought a turkey. I made Lucia's rosemary stuffing. Pilar brought pan dulce and a laugh that snapped something tight and mean in my chest and made it let go. Eli arrived early carrying a pot of arroz and a bottle of cheap wine he grinned about before I could. "I'll get better," he said. "At wine."
At everything. I know, I said. We ate at the table I'd refinished with my own hands. We lit a candle for Lucia. We didn't talk about the Whitakers. We didn't need to. The best revenge stories don't end with the villain in rags. They end with the hero stepping into a room where he belongs and realizing he doesn't miss the other room at all. If you were expecting me to say that Lionel called and begged, or that Margot sent a letter with a tear stain perfectly placed, I'll disappoint you. Life seldom gifts us such clean arcs. Some people never admit things. They just live inside the consequences like a house with a foundation that never quite stops settling. As for me, I fixed my porch light. I hired 2 new crews. I stopped eating sandwiches standing up at my counter and started setting plates. I bought flowers sometimes for no reason other than Lucia would have smiled at the way their petals opened. When people asked what changed, I'd say I did, and watch them try to correct me like I'd mispronounced the name of a city. On quiet nights, the maple taps the window when the wind moves just so. It's not a knock. It's not a warning. It's a reminder. You only accept the seats at tables that honor who you are. You only pay for homes where your name is one of the bricks in the foundation. And when your son says, "I want you there," you go. Not because you saved him again, but because he showed up for you first. Dad, Eli said the other night, standing in my doorway with a bag of oranges and a pie he'd burned the edges on. We're doing Noche Buena at our apartment. Small. Pilar, the kids, a couple of friends. Will you come? Do I need to bring anything? I asked. He grinned. Your rosemary's stuffing. And your stories. Then I'll be there, I said. This time, the door didn't close behind me like a verdict. It swung wide like an invitation I'd written for myself. And if there's any justice I care about, it's the kind that lets a man walk into a room and know the only price of admission is the truth he brings with him.